Many of our farmers are still facing a desperate shortage of workers. It's so bad the federal government is now waiving a $6,000 carrot to encourage Aussies to relocate to the country. Fruit and vegetable farmer Paul Shoker joins us now from Coffs Harbour in New South Wales. Paul, good to see you again. We just had the Deputy PM on. He didn't get around to answering this question, but getting workers into these areas is pretty difficult. How bad is it?
Yeah, no, it's a tough task and it keeps getting tougher. This year is going to be tougher again than last year, especially while we have border closures. I guess the one better thing at the moment is that we do have relatively free movement amongst the states. But until we see borders open, I think we're going to see the situation worsen.
Why do you think it is that you can't get workers? Are some reluctant to work?
Well, I guess if we look at the situation, the government poured a lot of stimulus into the economy. Australians who had lost their jobs were well supported. And whilst that has sort of tapered off a bit, we have seen people return to work pretty much as normal. So it's very difficult to compel people who have already got jobs to come to regional areas. And then the ones that are attracted, we look at areas like Coffs Harbour and Orange. In Coffs Harbour here, we have vacancy rates of less than 0.5%.
Yeah.
So when it comes to housing, so there are many factors at play here that seems to support this idea of Australians not coming onto farms.
Look, regional areas are booming, there's no doubt about that, and they have done over the last 12 months, but you getting in workers is obviously pretty difficult. Are the incentives enough that they're offering, the $6,000, is that enough to get people back on the farms, or what else needs to be done?
Well, we do appreciate these incentives, but I think ideally we are going to need these borders to reopen. But there are other things that perhaps government can look at, whether it's tax incentives as well. A lot of young Australians have got HECS debts. If there's some sort of arrangement they can come up with there. But ideally, talking to a lot of our New South Wales farmers members throughout the state, not only horticulturalists, but also we look at our grain farmers as well. They're all in their key windows for sowing. They are reporting severe labour shortages, and not just fruit pickers. We're talking about tractor drivers, truck drivers, all sorts of trades.
Yeah, look, the HECS idea is a good one, but there are also shortages across the board in hospitality. I think everyone's missing backpackers and those coming in on different visas. Surely they have to look at that as well at some point. I know there's a COVID crisis on, but they're going to have to allow some movement there, aren't they?
Well, there's many countries in the Pacific where we know there have been low instances of the virus. So we should hopefully be looking to open up a bubble there. Many of those economies have been decimated by COVID and the lack of tourism. So not only will we be helping Australian farmers out, but also those countries as well. So that would be one approach that we'd be looking at, is if we can get some of these Pacific Islander workers here into Australia, and relatively inexpensively as well.
Good on you, Paul. Lovely to talk to you this morning. You're just making me pine for a choc top banana there at Coffs Harbour. Love those things. Thanks, buddy. Prime Minister is under increasing pressure this morning to end the India flight ban and rescue stranded Aussies from the COVID-ravaged nation. Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack joins us now from Gladstone in Queensland. Good morning to you, Deputy PM. Thanks for your time this morning. Look, the PM yesterday seemed to be backtracking a little from the hard line of this policy. Do you agree with backing off a little?
Well, what he said was we will be constantly reviewing the pause, and the pause was put in place until May 15. So that's not long away, that's just 10 days away. We're constantly reviewing it, and we're doing what the medical experts have advised us to do, and this is important. So to keep Australia as COVID safe and as COVID free as we need it to be, this has been a difficult decision to make, but a necessary one.
But you won't be locking anyone up or giving them huge fines as an Australian citizen who returns from India?
Well, the Prime Minister's ruled that out, and we appreciate that these are very challenging times, and no more so than those Australians who are in India And that's why the Prime Minister on March 13 last year advised, encouraged, implored Australians who were overseas to make their way home, to get home as soon as they could. And we appreciate that many Australians, are overseas for various reasons, for family reasons, for work reasons. And this is particularly challenging for India at the moment. But we need to keep our country, as we've done all the way through, as COVID-free as we can. And this is why that decision was taken.
I get that, but what's the point of threatening jail time and fines? Do you regret that in the first place over the weekend?
Well, that's in the Act. That's actually in the Act, the Biosecurity Act, Carl. And but appreciate that we also needed to send a message. There were people who were suggesting that they were going to come via a different route, via a different way, and to get back into Australia. And that was seen largely by many as unfair, as potentially breaching the faith and breaching what we put into place. And so we needed to be very strong on this. It is difficult because we need to, of course, make sure that Australia continues to be as COVID-free as we can make it possibly be. That's what we've done all the way through. That's why our case rates, our death rates are at a minimum. They are the envy of the world, and we will continue to make sure that we put in place the measures as advised by the Chief Medical Officer, Paul Kelly, and the experts to ensure that we do keep and continue Australia with that COVID record that we have.
The problem is that members of your own party are saying you got it wrong. Matt Canavan was on our program and has been for the last week or so talking about this, even in the last couple of days as well, saying you got the India policy wrong. Are you sticking with it though? Have you spoken to Matt Canavan?
Well, I speak to Matt Canavan regularly, but appreciate that people are going to have different views. I've got a large Indian population in my own electorate, Carl, and we do feel for those. I speak to people from the Indian community regularly. I know people like Javinder Ving Surk have done a great job to get Indians home on repatriation flights, on charter flights. But at the moment, we've got a pause, and that pause is in place until May 15. It's only 10 days away.
Okay.
We're reviewing it constantly, and we want to get as many Australians home as we can.
But given the crisis is only growing in India, and we've seen what's happened with the cricketers, it looks like Mike Hussey is the latest to maybe have tested positive to COVID. How is that going to change that policy, given the numbers increasing?
Well, we're taking advice from the medical experts, and we'll review it constantly, Carl. That's what we've said we're doing, and that's what we will do. And we will, as we've done all the way through, we've had repatriation flights, government-facilitated flights, humanitarian flights. We had one out of Wuhan very early in the COVID-19 piece. Qantas were magnificent to facilitate that with the government assistance. So we've been very good. We've been very humanitarian, as you would expect a government such as Australia to be, and we'll continue to do that.
OK, you are announcing today in Gladstone, I believe, pre-budget announcement, your government guaranteeing a $250 million injection into regional Australia. I can't help but think, though, that what they need in regional Australia is workers right now. How are we going to fill all those jobs, and what are we going to do about visas?
66,000 jobs, Carl, and look at the ambience, look at the atmosphere, look at the temperature up here in beautiful Gladstone. We've got one of the best ports in all of Australia right behind me. Not only is it a very industrious port, but it's a beautiful facility here for families. 43,000 Australians last year moved from the capital cities, moved from the metropolitan areas into regional Australia. No better time to move to regional Australia right now. We're putting in the services, we're putting in the amenities in regional Australia as we've continued to do so. Round 6 of the Building Better Regions, where we take those community needs and expectations, we look at them. It's a very competitive process, but we're building a better regional Australia. We want people to come out here, Carl. 66,000 jobs are out here going at the moment, and they're in all sorts of endeavours. They're not just in meat processing plants or fruit picking, as some make out. They're in law firms, they're in accountancy practices, they're in health, education, good jobs, well-paying jobs, and very, very friendly people. I always say, country Australia, big enough in which to get a good cup of coffee, small enough to still care. OK, Michael, lots to talk about in regards to employment in the regional areas, and those visas we'll leave for another day. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.